Welcome to the Versus History Podcast with your hosts, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, Connell Smith, and Elliot Watson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Versus History Podcast. We're delighted to have you along with us. I'm your host, that's Patrick O'Shaughnessy at History Chappie on the Twitter for those that are partial to a bit of social media. But today we are absolutely delighted to be joined by one of the most interesting gentlemen I've ever been fortunate enough to speak to or meet via social media. His name is DJ Dribbler, and he has written a book called, wait for it, Harry's Kebab House. Mr. DJ Dribbler, welcome to Versus History. Thanks for giving up the time to come and speak to us today.
Hello, thanks very much for having me. Yeah.
Aye, the pleasure's all ours. It really is. Can you tell us all about you? Because when I stumbled across your profile on social media, I sort of came about it via some of the other podcasts we've done on either drum and bass music or pirate radio. Your Twitter handle, sort of a confluence of all those fascinating things. Please tell us about yourself, Mr. Dribbler, and your background as a DJ and your global toing and throwing. Over to you.
Okay, well, I started DJing in 1989 when I went to college in Edinburgh, which was Queen Margaret College, and I was just really quite arrogant and cocky, and I was just telling the DJs that they were rubbish. And you know, we'd been getting into acid house and house music for about a year at this point, but nothing major had opened. Like there weren't any big clubs or anything like that. But we were into it, and kind of I suppose we just wondered if it was going to last. You know, but it kicked off, and we didn't really know what to make of it, if it was going to still be around in a few years or what. But we had no idea what was going to come. But anyway, I just annoyed these DJs at the student union so much that they were like, eventually one of them was like, well, do you think you could do better? And I said, yeah, I could, yeah. And but I'd never DJed before at that point. But, you know, a couple of my friends had got really into it, went out and bought decks, bought mixers, and they were buying house records, were getting records sent up from London, and had sourced these records that were coming over from the States, and managed to get hold of them, and they were playing them, and they were obviously like right into it. These were people who'd been into bands, playing in bands, who were into maybe heavy metal or Black Sabbath or Hawkwind or things of that nature previous, and they just kind of adopted this new dance music sound. So it was like completely different really for these long-haired kind of rocker types that I knew that had suddenly just changed into like day glow ravers, you know, like. But yeah, I started in college, and then that was in 1989, and then a year after that, in 1990, there was a club called Pure, which opened in Edinburgh in August of 1990, and I was one of the 4 resident DJs at that. And by the time we'd opened Pure, we really knew what we were doing. We'd been traveling down the Hacienda in Manchester. We'd been to big clubs in London, and we knew the score. We knew what was going on, and we had all the records. We'd been into things. We'd been into it for a couple of years at this point, and basically we started our own night or our own club, and it just took off. Everyone, it was packed every week, and we booked all the top DJs and artists from the States and Europe, and the club became a kind of seminal institution in Edinburgh's and Scotland's club life. So I played there from 1990 until 1998, and during that time I was asked by Orbital, the techno band Orbital, to be their tour DJ. So I gladly accepted that and went on tour with them around Europe a couple of times and did various other gigs around the place. And from those gigs, I met loads of people. You know, I met people in every city basically. And I just started hustling DJing hardcore after that. I just started getting, hooking up gigs and traveling to these places and playing. My sister was also a stewardess with Air UK at the time, so I was uniquely affordable.
That helps
because I could fly everywhere for a tenner. So like, I think that helped a lot. So yeah, I got these gigs and started hustling DJing. Left Pure, like I say, in '98. Did another year or so and living in Glasgow, started another club with a guy called Colin Gate, who's in a band called Deep Sensation, who was just come back from New York at the time and been producing for a guy called Todd Terry, who's a very famous artist and had played a massive role in Acid House in the UK. He was a New York DJ and producer, Todd Terry, and he'd just come back from there. So me and him started playing, and it was all house music still. And the other guys that I was doing Pure with, one of them went off and set up a club called Optimal. That's very popular, very big just now, well known all over the world. And the other two just, one of them just did his thing. I think he ended up becoming a spy for MI6 or something like that. And there's one other one just stuck to DJing, but never really went on that global thing. So anyway, after about a year of playing in Glasgow, after Pure finished, I realised that there was the millennium was coming up, and I didn't want to be inside a club, a dark, sweaty club. Again, at New Year, I'd been at the bells, they call it in Scotland. So when you hear the bells at New Year, they'd always be in these like dark, grimy clubs. And I decided that I didn't want to do that for the millennium. So like I thought, where's the best place I'd ever been? And it was New York. I'd been there in 1989, in the summer of 89. And I decided, yeah, that's the best place I've been. So I went, I'd found out that my friend was over there living in her auntie's house in Queens. And I said, right, hang it, I'm just going to go to New York. I'm going to go to New York and for the millennium. So I did. I went over there. I'd been over a couple of times in 99, just for extended stays, 2 or 3 weeks. And then I went over at the millennium, and it blew me away, man. I couldn't believe the change in New York. They'd cleaned it up, and I just, I went out to a couple of clubs, and there was no alcohol in them. Like one was called Body and Soul, and the other one was called The Shelter. And I remember going to Body and Soul on Millennium Day, or the 2nd of January, maybe the 1st or 2nd. It was, possibly the 2nd, but of 2000, and it just blew my mind. I thought, I'd been DJing for 10 years at this point, and I'd been touring with Orbital, toured all over Europe. I knew what I was doing, but I was basically just drinking a lot and buying whatever was coming out in the record shops that week and going and playing it, like somewhere in, Dublin or Vienna or London or whatever it was. And I just realized when I was standing in Body and Soul this day, I had this epiphany that I was like, oh my God, I'm just lost in a desert. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 10 years and I haven't got a clue. I'm just getting drunk and traveling around the world, playing these records that come out that people bring out every week that I buy in a record shop. And it's very methodical. And if I'm serious about it, I need to come to this. I need to come to this club every week, and I need to learn. I need to relearn everything, that I think I know. My style of DJ and how I'm, approaching it. The not drinking was huge. And how are you going to get through 8 hours in a nightclub without a drink? I just couldn't get my head around it. But no, I soon found out that you just dance your ass off, and you soon forget about that. But yeah, I went to these clubs and I just went, all right, that's it. I'm going to move here. And, I came back, packed in all my residencies. There was residencies, London, Dublin, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Vienna, packed them all in and just flew to New York straight away. And within about 2 weeks, I was making about 900 a week DJing just through getting bar gigs in the East Village. Everyone was really accommodating. And, I knew what I was doing. I could DJ, and I brought some good stuff with me. And it was all on vinyl, and I just started getting gigs. And then as soon as I got one gig, it was just like my name got passed around. And everyone in New York tries to help you out. It's all about your clout is what you can do for people. So, people are all like, yeah, I can hook you up with this guy. I can hook you up with this woman. Like this bar, you should be playing here. You should be doing that. I can help you out with this. And everyone kind of does this scratch each other's back kind of approach to things. So within the 2 weeks, like I say, I was earning about $800-900 bucks a week. DJing, and I never looked back, man. I stayed there for 10 years, and just played around New York, setting up my own parties, doing my own thing, you know, the DJing wherever I was asked. But at the same time, I was able to go to these other clubs that had made me move there, and learn, you know, like this trade, this craft that I just suddenly understood. There was so much more to it than I was, you know, what I was committing to it. You know, it wasn't just a case of going and drinking your rider and playing for 2 hours. You know, it was much more serious than that. You know, the clubs in New York, with people were crying in them, you know, and it was very soulful and deep. And I guess it'd be kind of like the Northern Soul scene was in the UK, where people were just really serious about it, and it was all about the dancing, and you know, it wasn't about going to pull a bird, or you know, it wasn't a meat market, and it was, you know, there was all a rainbow family, every type of person you can imagine, of every age group, just like all under one roof in New York. And it wasn't like that, and you know, the clubs in the UK were hot water only policy. You know, like you got searched heavily going in. You know, the dance floors were just a sodden mess. People were drinking as broken glass. You know, like it just really a much darker and a more kind of sordid affair going out and clubbing, and it like kind of had an age thing going as well, where you know, you once you got into your mid-30s, you were kind of like you looked a little old, you know, to be out, and people would treat you. That just wasn't the case, and well, generally across Europe and in the States, but certainly in New York at the time, there was people in their 70s, perhaps even their 80s, that were out in the clubs, and you didn't bat an eyelid at it. So anyway, I was there till 2009, and then I left there in a blaze of glory, I was doing after show parties with Bell and Sebastian, who are a Scottish band, and I was organising their after show parties, and I basically got caught. I got stopped doing these after show parties with when they Googled my name at the airport when they came in 2009. And even though I was getting paid in the UK and what have you, I didn't have the right visa, so they threw me out. Ouch. And that was that. You know, like I felt like my life was over. But I came back and set up a couple of things in Glasgow for a interim period of 2 years. Then I moved to the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean, where I just got into surfing, and I was DJing 5 nights a week there. I stayed there for 4 or 5 years, and it got too heavy. It was a lot of robberies, there was a lot of murder, and there was just a lot of chaos going on around me. So I left there again, and came back to the UK and stayed in London. Met my girlfriend and moved down to London. So just been DJing and working down there with a DJ called Mixmaster Morris. Hooked up with him and started putting on nights and doing more chilled events. And in that time, I got asked by Red Light Radio in Amsterdam if I would host a monthly show every 4 weeks. So I said, yes, I'd love to. And started flying over Amsterdam every 4 weeks. So when I was over there, that was like 2016, 2015, 2016. And when I was there, you know, I started getting offered gigs in the clubs. When I was there, I'd be there for the weekend. So I'd be doing Canvas, you know, I'd be playing in a place called the Kashmir Lounge, and Vaux Hotel, which is just various places in Amsterdam that I would end up playing there so I was flying there every 4 weeks and playing there. And then after about 4 years of that, the lockdown hit, but I'd been coming to Ibiza for, let's see, about 12 years at that point, on and off. 12 years on and off in the summertime to DJ, staying with friends who live here. And You know, I'd keep coming out for 1 week and end up staying for 4 or 5. Just always getting extra gigs and just cancelling the flights because they were only 20 quid to the UK, whatever. So started playing here all the time, and then brought my girlfriend here because she didn't know. She thought it was just like madness, like with the clubs and things like that. And I was like, no, it's really chilled out. You know, like, you don't really see much of that stuff. So we moved here in 2018, and the end of 2018 to Ibiza, and I've been living here ever since.
That is some story. Blimey.
That's the DJing side of it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think the next question is going to be a little bit difficult for you. It's definitely simple, I think, but given that you're so immersed in the scene, I think it's going to be difficult because you know so much. So here we go. Let's have a look. To get the ball rolling,
let's have a go.
Create some controversy for us. Name the greatest DJ and the greatest nightclub of all time. It's going to be difficult because you've seen so much of the clubbing scene.
Well,
over such a long period of time. So if you can have a go at that for us, please feel free. If you can't, don't.
Well, here's the thing, Patrick. I don't know if I could be black and white about this because name the greatest DJ of all time. You know, it's just really difficult. I mean, I could only really comment on ones that I've seen. And greatest nightclub as well. It was greatest club and greatest DJ.
Yeah, that's the one.
You know, I could only really comment on ones that I've been to. You know, like I didn't go to Paradise Garage, and I never saw Larry Levan. I didn't go to Wigan Casino. I didn't go to to Coup, you know, or Amnesia in 1988. I didn't go to these ones, but I have been to a lot of good clubs, and I would have to just say, from my point of view, well, first of all, I've been really lucky, I think, in my clubbing kind of life or lifespan, because when I got into house music, the Hacienda was on, and I was able to, our college had a minibus that they would give out to people who had clubs in the minibus. So like if there was a bird watching club, or, you know, if there was a club that like a hill climbing club or some whatever, they would get to use the minibus once a month. So I started a club called the Cathedral Club. So I started the Cathedral Club, and would, like, all these ravers joined the Cathedral Club. So what we would do was they would give us the use of the minibus once a month to go and visit these cathedrals in the north of England. So what we used to go down and like get 12, just like 14, you know, mad ravers on a bus on the college minibus. And we go down, get our picture taken outside Manchester Cathedral, and go to the Hacienda, you know, and then go through to Leeds and go to the Nightmares and Wax, who did an after hours party in Leeds called the Twilight Zone in Chapeltown, and we used to go to that. So then we go to Leeds Cathedral, get our picture taken, and then we'd go through to Nottingham on the Saturday night and go to the Cool Cat in Nottingham. So we'd get the same thing, you know, get our picture taken at the cathedral, and then we'd get the minibus back up to Scotland, you know, like we'd end up with some riding stables or some mad rave somewhere, you know, in the kitchen in Hume or something like that, and we'd have to get the minibus back up for, you know, first thing Monday morning. So, you know, we'd always leave the north of England on the Sunday and get back up. So yeah, that's that was how it started up in Scotland for going out. As far as going to see who the best DJ is, I'd say like one of the best sets I've ever heard was Derek May when he played at Pure the first time. I think it was a lot of people heard that, and like Neil Landstrom, the techno artist, he was there. DJ Q, the house artist. There was a lot of people there that night that decided that this was for them. And it was an unforgettable set. But yeah, he's not in the he's not the best person to be talking about these days. History hasn't played out very well for Derek, but certainly that was a brilliant. I wouldn't call him the greatest DJ. There's little Lewis from Chicago who has been doing it since the 70s. Started playing 74. And on hearing every time I've heard him, he's been incredible. So I might have to give it. I might have to give it to him, yeah. But then, like I say, like my history was going to ASEAN. Then we started Pure when we stopped going to Manchester. So Pure for the next 8 years was regarded as one of the top clubs in the world. So I was really lucky with that. Then I moved to New York and I was going to Body and Soul in the Shelter, where you have Timmy Regisford, Francois Kevorkian, Danny Crivet, and Joe Clisell, who again are all probably worthy of that. Certainly the clubs, Body and Soul and the Shelter, I'd say Body and Soul, Shelter and Pure are the best nights I've been to. And they're different in different ways. The nightclub, the best space is probably Vinyl in New York as well. But, there's some, yeah, I'd say those. It's really difficult question. That it's a really hard one.
One of those. The more you know, the harder it gets to answer.
Yeah, for various reasons, it's various people. Like for longevity and for like intensity, I would have to say Little Lewis. And then for best set that I've heard, I'd say Derek May, and for Francois Kevorkian for an all-round DJ. For the club, I'd probably say Pure or Vinyl in New York City.
We'll take that. Thank you, DJ Dribbler. Okay, then let's get into the food and drink of the podcast then. Set the scene for us, if you will. What is your book, Harry's Kebab House, all about, in a nutshell?
Harry's Kebab House, Harry's Kebabs, basically Harry's Kebabs was a kebab shop in King's Cross in London around 89, 90 when we were going raving. And we're down there. The Seaman had a squat up York Way, up from King's Cross a wee bit. There was all these big squats, and Lee Scratch Perry lived there. And Homeboy a Hippie, a Funky Dread, the Seaman, various techno originators, acid and techno originators, all lived in these squats. And Harry's Kebabs was a kebab shop, which was also a needle exchange in King's Cross. So it sold kebabs, and you could exchange your needles. So it had a sign in the window that was cut out cardboard, a cardboard cut out from a cornflake packet or something, and it was handwritten that said Harry's Kebabs and Works. And that was what was, like you get like bag of chips, £1.50 or something like that. Like they had kebabs and Works. So I always thought that was really funny. I mean, it's like kind of like I understand the gravity, the seriousness of it all, but at the same time, I just thought that was really funny. And we would come out of the raves and see this place. So what happened was that a lot of my friends were on the rave scene in London. They were going to Clink Street in 88, and they were working with the Seaman making the videos. And the Seaman played a massive part in the acid house scene because they started doing a tour called Synergy, and they would take bands and DJs with them on this tour, right? So that the concerts became a kind of mini rave that started at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock concert time. But they would have Orbital with them. They'd have Meat Beat Manifesto. They'd have all these different DJs, Mr. C, Sticker, Lex, Blue Boy. And they took this tour on the road and were kind of like pushing this rave scene. And we were welcomed into it because the Seaman were from Aberdeen, where I'm from originally. But I'd moved down to Edinburgh and Glasgow, and they knew about us and what we were doing, and knew that we were on it. And we were promoting, or the people who were promoting our club were promoting their gigs. So there was a hookup happened, and we were going down there to stay. down in these squats and just meeting up with people like Casper Pound, who ran Rising High Records, and various other people on the scene. And my friends were started to organize pirate radios, the stations, and started to do squat party. The squat party scene took off, and people were taken over cinemas, pubs, offices, whatever it was. They were breaking into them and then moving in sound systems and having squat parties in them. So basically, one of my mates, Malcolm, was doing this and was a really hardcore guy. He'd been in the Merchant Navy, and he was from the northeast of Scotland, the same as me originally. But he was living down there in Marylebone, and he was throwing all these parties and doing all this mad stuff. And then we were at Notting Hill Carnival, and he fell over and cracked his head. And then we were in a pub, and it had this kind of raised stage that was only a couple of inches raised, like a mad wee stage. It was only a couple of inches like higher than the normal floor. And it was this metal surrounding on it so that people, when they stood on the wooden stage, it wouldn't, just protect, like a ribbon round it to protect it. And he fell over and cracked the back of his head on this metal. And he was out, and just really worried about him. And he took off into the night and blah, blah, blah. Just, ended up being concussed and what have you. And then the most bizarre thing happened was that the following year, we went to Notting Hill every year. And the following year, we were back in the same pub, and he slipped and cracked his head on the same stage. So what happened was he'd developed dementia. He'd cracked his head so badly that he'd developed dementia. So what I started to do was I just realized that how much chaos and how much madness would, the things that we'd got up to over the years had been so mad that I just started writing them down to try and jog his memory of things that we'd done, just do you remember throwing this party? Do you remember this when your wife did that? Do you remember this happening? And things like that. And it was just to try and help him. And after about 3 weeks, I did a word count, and it was at 17,000 words I'd written or something like that. And I remember my friend Carly was doing a thesis, and it was a 10,000, and she wouldn't stop going on about this thesis. Oh, I've got this 10,000 word thesis, man, and she'd been doing it for about a year. And then I'd written 17,000 words in 3 weeks. I mean, I wasn't getting marked on it or anything, but I thought, well, how many words are in a book? So I Googled it, and I just Googled how many words are in a book. And it said 50,000 words and you've got a novel. And I thought, 50,000 words? I've written 17,000 words in 3 weeks, man. I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to keep going with this. I've not even got half of it out, the things that we did. So I just started writing down more and more. And before I knew it, I'd written about 90 to 100,000 words. And I thought, oh, Christ, what am I going to do? So I just started making segues and inventing character names and giving attributing things that had happened to these characters that I'd made up in my head. So I just kind of started being able to picture these people, these characters, who were combinations of all the people that I'd known and all the things that had happened in London in the 90s. And I just started being able to think like them and, put myself in their shoes and be able to look around the room that they were in and describe everything that was in that room. And I just found an aptitude for it. I was able to do it. And so that's what I did. I just turned the basic notes on to help my friend's dementia. On all the magic that we got up to, I just kind of turned that into a fictional novel, twisting it. So Harry's Kebabs is basically about 5 characters who are, around the rave scene, but it's not about the raves. It's about the characters and how they get their money, how they hustle their money, and how they, just live their lives. Because back then it was a lot easier to just, you know, like not scrounge, but, you know, just to hustle your way through, you know, like you could squat in London, you didn't have rent. You know, it was a lot more bohemian and a lot more artistic. Like the people who could move there and who could exist there were, you know, it was feasible, and that's what was happening. You know, so it was like a punk ethos of do it yourself that was still left over. You know, it's a really hard city, really rough. Doesn't take any prisoners. London, it's really tough. There was that like remnants of punk, those attitudes that like the Squats were still going strong, and people were just setting up their own record labels and setting up their own t-shirt companies and their own fashion and doing it themselves, designing their own flyers. I'll do it. I'll be the DJ, you know, I'll be the band, like whatever it was. So Harry's Kebabs is 5 characters on that scene, you know, and who are connected by that scene in various different ways. One person is, one of the characters is a pool shark from Cameroon. He's a pool hustler who was could have been a professional footballer, but you know, it's all in the book. He moved to London to pursue a football career. The second one, another guy, is he plays quiz machines. They used to have quiz machines in the 80s and the 90s before mobile phones took on and everyone could just get the answers. But yeah, a guy that I knew called Pete, he used to play the quiz machines, and like he knew all the answers. So like 20p was 20 quid to him because he would always win. So he started going, this guy lived in Edinburgh, but I made him, you know, it's just all because it's a fiction. I just move the characters around and whatnot.
Of course.
So I just, I gave this guy, I knew this guy Shifty, that was an Arsenal supporter that played cards. And I always found it was really funny that people would play somebody called Shifty at cards. And I just, you know, I wouldn't play somebody called Shifty at cards. I always thought that was really funny, and that stuck with me. So I just created this character called Shifty and gave him a photographic memory, and he was able to remember the quiz machine answers. So he gets his money like that. Another guy, one of the other characters, Trooper, is a professional beggar, who's a guy I know who was a DJ, one of the top DJs, very inspirational one to me, and ended up just like, was up at King's Cross after a rave, and was just sitting down against the wall, and people took his hat off, propping himself up against the wall, and just like, and people started putting money in his hat. Like, he was just sitting there getting a breather outside McDonald's. And people started giving him money, and he thought, before you knew it, like he was begging like £300 a day up at King's Cross, just going up and sitting there. And he started selling like drum and bass CDs, or like jungle, it was at the time, breakbeat CDs from Camden Market. He did his own little stall kind of thing going on at King's Cross, and he was making hundreds a day. So that's another character. And then another one's a merchant seaman, who's my mate who organised all the squat parties. And then another one is a mechanic guy who ran a pirate radio station in the East End, who's a bit, like I say, they're all people I know, they're all people I knew. I just amalgamated them all. So those are the 5 characters. They're all male, just the way it worked out, man. It's just who I was hanging out with at the time. I've tried to write and for female, but I can't get my head into what they're thinking, you know. I can't get into the female mindset. So I've just left it at all male. There are some female characters in it, and they are quite strong characters, but the main ones are 5 guys.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. DJ Dribbler, for that. Okay, I suppose every book, historical fiction or non-fiction, is born out of its context. So the late 80s, early 90s in Britain, what do we need to know about the context of the UK at the time to help make sense of Harry's Kebab House? I mean, be it football, rave music, politics, Thatcher, John Major, privatisation, war, pirate radio. Well, tell us, what are the key themes?
Thatcher was kind of on the way out. I think Major came in. What was it, John? 1990 he came in. Certainly, I've seen a lot of socio-documentary kind of style approaches, which say, raving was a result of, you know, the miners' strike, the mass unemployment, very much the political landscape of the 80s. But for me, I don't agree with that. I just didn't see it that way at all. I would say that the early 80s, you know, the rioting in Brixton and Toxteth and Handsworth was way more, you know, related to the government and political directly, like this the two-tone thing and the, you know, the punks and the skinheads were political. You know, like they started out, punk was like anti everything, but then it did get really political very quickly. You know, like with Crass and like the anarchy kind of thing, like was adopted, and like the Exploited, and you know, it was all very. It was just really heated. You know, there was a lot of racial tension at that point, and you know, people were tribal as well. Like the groups, you know, you were a mod, or you were a rocker, or you were a new romantic, or you were a casual, you know, like you're a biker or whatever you were, you know, like people were very tribal, you know, like everyone seemed to be into something, like an indie kid, or I was into Smiths or whatever it was, and you could see them and spot them by what they were wearing, and you know, you'd see them on the high streets. And that all kind of melted. You know, everyone kind of got into house music in 1989. So all that kind of went out the window. And I don't really see there was any politics behind it or anything political really that motivated it. I mean, there was for me, the culture of raving and perhaps, you know, like the traveling aspect certainly was the football culture. You know, the traveling, but generally they were traveling to fight, you know, like, the same went for local discos, you know, like people were going from town to town to go to the discos, and generally it was to fight, you know, like if you didn't pull, you know, a girl, then you would get in a fight, you know, like that was kind of the way that these things ended up. And it was accepted, you know, and like people were going to gigs to fight, people were going to discos to fight. You know, and everyone was fighting. And I suppose there was like a lot of anger with the unemployment being what it was. And I suppose the miners' strike, and there was a culture of riotous activity with the football and the, you know, and the miners certainly. I mean, you know, nobody talks about the IRA like influence as well, which was massive, you know, at the time. But I never really saw raving as being a result of politics. I always saw raving as being a combination of the northern soul scene, which again, people used to travel from all over the country to different small youth hostels or, you know, YMCA buildings or whatever it was, these places, music halls that were staging these northern soul all-nighters. And generally in the north, you know, Wigan, Manchester, Blackpool. And people were coming down from the very north of Scotland to that, you know, 12-hour drives, and people coming up from London. People were flying in eventually from Japan. So there was that traveling aspect for that, and there was it was all about dancing and not, you know, it wasn't about like scoping out girls or meat market kind of activity. That was certainly northern soul scene, and then the football thing was kind of like, I suppose, the fashion and you know, what you listen to, the type of music you listen to. Like a lot of the football were into Style Council, and that was you know, the Jam or Style Council, and these things had stemmed from the Northern Soul era. You know, there was it was a psychobilly. There was a period of psychobillies, and it was all about going out and dancing to this music, to whatever it was. It was about going out, and psychobilly was certainly about going mental, you know, down at the front doing these mosh pit kind of dances. So that people were into dancing through northern, through the rockabilly, psychobilly thing, the traveling with the football, you know, and the punk DIY nature of just doing it yourself, doing up your own flyers, doing up your own record label, you know, making your own music. So I think a combination of youth culture was far more explanatory for why rave happened. I mean, there was obviously ecstasy came along, and then that's what brought down all the walls, and that was the excitement that people, the forbidden fruit or whatever, that meant that everyone got into it. Like if you were rugby players, or if you were into jazz or any kind of music, any kind of fashion, any kind of club interest, any social activity, really, and basic drug enthusiasts, like who were into this new thing. So like all the northern thing had kind of imploded because they were doing so much speed and heroin and speed and things like that. Were had caught on with the punks and the soul boys. And I think ecstasy came along and a lot of them stopped doing all that. It just gave them a whole new outlook. So people who were coming along to the parties that you saw at first would be wearing bullet belts and a Stranglers t-shirt, and 2 weeks later they'd be in a pink hood and sun on it, and a pair of dungarees, and nobody questioned that. It was like easy access, social fun. The social scene was sorted, and everyone was welcoming to it. So I don't really see the political side of it. I just saw it was more of I saw the youth culture and how they all came together. And when the walls were battered down with the age thing, it was the combination of the ex-punks, of the ex-Northern Soul, and of this new school of E-heads and that had come through, like the acid heads and the E-heads, just combined to create acid house.
But yeah, that makes complete sense. Right, final question from us then. That's the sort of context of scene backdrop to your book. But what do you think is the legacy or historical significance now of that late 1980s, early 1990s rave scene? What's left of it, and what should we look to it for, and what should we see in it?
Well, I think the legacy of it is that it's still here. Like we weren't sure if it was going to last. I mean, it was getting shut down by the authorities. It was, people were moving into the scene very quickly because there was a lot of money in it. And there was, it was quite dark and nasty, man. I mean, people say things, people think that they talk about these loved up, rooms full of loved up people hugging each other and that. But I just remember being in like boxing clubs and, being some really sketchy, dodgy people, like people with one eye offering you a sweetie and things like that, and just being a bit scared, but that was me at 17, 18 when I started going out. But I think the legacy is that really the kids are doing exactly the same. Nothing's really changed, man. I mean, every 5 years since the Second World War, if you look at it, there was a complete turnaround in youth culture. Like the Teddy boys started dressing up and turning their backs, like the post-war austerity, and dressing in expensive, Edwardian clothes, which is basically what our grandparents had worn. The Edwardian period was like 40 years previous. It was basically just what their grandparents had. So, like the same respect, like the things have a cycle. Like they say, the fashions and cultures have a 20-year,
They do indeed
have a 20-year cycle. I mean, this was that, but that was kind of the same thing, but like within 5 years of the Teddy boys being there, they were kind of like all out the window, but 5 years is between 13 and 18. It's a generation it's a teenage generation. Like when the teenagers came in the 50s, then they decided they were into rock. They were rockers now. They weren't Teddy boys. They were rockers, and then everything was getting smashed up, like all the music halls and what have you. And then the mods came along as the antithesis to them, because they were into this futuristic kind of way of dressing, like with it, wearing silk suits and what have you. And then, that was only 5 years after that. And then 5 years, and that was the early 60s. And then 5 years after that, the hippies started coming along. This is all 5 years up. I think glam rock, skinheads, then disco, in hip hop, for God's sake. There wasn't any hip hop before 1979, 1980, really, and then it came, and then there was like the Northern Soul thing. Like I said, reggae music arrived in the 70s, and there was just complete transformations of like your younger brothers and sisters growing up and telling the older ones that we're not interested in your long hair or your motorbike or whatever. We're into this. We've got a new way of dancing. We've got a new way of speaking. We've got new clothes that we wear. We've got a whole new style, and it's called something. It's a whole new cultural change. And that happened right up until 1988 when Acid House happened. And basically, it's been just variations of that. Like people have got their phones out now filming the light show, but it's still going out and going to some warehouse to dance to DJs. It's still, nobody's really turned around and went, that's boring. We're not into that. We're into this, and come up with some new way of, new style of music, new way of dancing, new vernacular, new fashion, which is, like I say, it happened every 5 years, and then it just stopped. Like there was offshoots, like there's been, jungle, and there's, obviously like television and media has been influenced massively by people going out. I mean, you could see that when the adverts started getting all psychedelic and, flowers and stuff like that started coming into it, and like De La Soul style in 89, 90, and you were like, oh yeah, whoever's behind this advert's been going down to Shoom, or like whatever it was. You could see that the influences were coming in, and it's just basically saturated into everything, like the trippy kind of like the graphic design, the excuse me, the music styles, the whole ethos of going out, like what you do, the DJ worshiping, what you're going out, what you're dancing to, the drugs that you're taking, the way you're speaking, all of that is kind of the same. And I think that's a huge legacy. And that, nothing really has come along that they've went, no, this is better than that. Let's do that instead. So the kids are kind of just doing what we were doing in their own way. I think it's more, it doesn't have the same energy, it seems, but because of the energy of the whole new freshness of house music and going out raving at the time, it was really exciting, and it was definitely ours, and nothing that had happened before mattered. It was just the line was drawn in the sand. This is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it, and we know what we're doing, and it's ours. And nobody's really come along and stepped up and said, no, we're not doing that anymore, we're doing this now. And the whole generation is went, yeah, let's do that instead. Like let's get Rubik's cubes, or whatever it is, and let it's like stay in, But yeah, I think that's the legacy of it. The way that it's just infiltrated into every aspect of media, film, design, advertising. I just think the legacy of house music and the acid house scene and the raves has it just dissipated, just like the hippie scene did into everyday life. And I kind of wish somebody would come along with something new, but really they haven't. And I think that's its major legacy, is it's nothing's beat it yet, and that's been 30 odd years.
Certainly has. Thank you very much indeed, Russ, aka DJ Dribbler. Now your book, Harry's Kebab House, let's say someone wants to go and buy that, where can they get it? Or if they want to get in touch with you to discuss any aspect of the podcast or any aspect of your work, how can they get in touch with you? So your book and you, where can we get hold of both?
Okay, well, I've got my book's called Harry's Kebabs, and it's on Amazon. Published it, and I self-published it with Amazon. So you can get it on Amazon. DJ Dribbler, Harry's Kebabs. And I've written a sequel to Harry's Kebabs as well, called The Takeaway, which has only been out about 10 months at the moment. Harry's Kebabs been out 2.5, coming up 3 years, and it's done really well. It's got great reviews, and it's went down really well with everyone that's read it. So I was really chuffed about that, because it was my debut novel, and I didn't really set out to write a book. But yeah, they can get it on Amazon, or you can buy it from various record shops. Piccadilly in Manchester has it, Rub-a-Dub in Glasgow has it, Underground Solution in Edinburgh will have it. You can order it in WH Smith's now. You can order it in Waterstones. And I've got a place called Dishonored in Paris are selling it, and Ultra Suoni in Rome. They're all record shops, man. Like apart from W.H. Smiths and Waterstones, but it's the record shops that have been punting my book. They're the ones that like it. But yeah, just like with Amazon, a lot of people are like, oh, it's Amazon, you know, the ogres and what have you. And yeah, I can see that and understand that. But I would just like to say quickly that if it wasn't for Amazon, there wouldn't be any book. What happened at the time when I started writing Harry's Kebabs, which was back in 2014, I needed to have an agent to get published. And an agent needed 3 books completed. So Harry's Kebabs have initially it took me 5 years to finish that with all the editing and whatnot. So that was 15 years of books before I'd even get, before a publisher would even talk to me. And then it was down to other people. If they liked it, the publisher had to like it, the agent had to like it. So Amazon came along in about 2015, 2016 and said, I'll hang all that. We'll do it all for you. But they started out initially as a book buying and reselling. That was their initial business, was buying and selling secondhand books. That's what he did out of his garage. So the guy at Amazon said, we will publish, we'll print your book, we'll publish it. We will translate it and distribute it for you, and we'll print them one at a time. So it meant with a publisher, but you would have to get 500 to 1,000 copies printed. You'd be in debt until you paid them off. And like I say, you had to have 3 books written. You had to do all this, blah, blah, blah. Amazon let me go straight ahead and print my first book straight away. Also, they gave me 70% of the royalties, as opposed to the usual 12 to 15% that you would get from a publisher. So I know people have got major issues with Amazon, but I'm not sure if a lot of them understand that side of the business. Just in as far as writing books and authors go, they've made it possible for me to do this. I would not have been able to put my book out. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Amazon. So please, if anyone does have an issue, take that on board and cut them some slack on that one. You can stop buying diapers and wooden spoons, but keep buying books.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Versus History Podcast. Visit us at www.versushistory.com and follow us at Versus History on Twitter and Instagram. You can download all episodes from iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or from wherever you get your podcasts.